Welcome into another episode of Always Talking Ball. I'm Tyler Noe, he's Lance Barton, and we are here to recap week 3 of college football. If you're not doing so already, make sure to subscribe and follow the show. Throw us a rating and a like, and share the show with your friends and coworkers. Lance, let's just jump right into it. Let's kick things off with our week 3 Better Than the AP Poll ATB Top 12 presented by Homefield. Gear up with the best vintage designs from Homefield Apparel. Rep your school in style and save 15% off of your entire purchase with promo code ATB15. Do not miss out. Shop now at Homefield Apparel and use ATB15 at checkout for 15% off. We're just going to jump right in. Top 12. We were pretty much in lockstep on this one. Had a couple of disagreements, but we went ahead and after a couple teams' performances late last night in the late window, we moved Texas up to number 1 over Georgia. Georgia, obviously, at number 2, they struggled a little bit with Kentucky. But Texas, man, they just obviously they weren't playing any world beaters. They were playing a UTSA team who lost the previous week to Texas State by 39. But typically when you see a team, have to go from the first string to the second string, you see a little drop off, and they just didn't miss a beat when Quinn Ewers went down with what seems to be a fairly serious injury, judging by his reaction. But Arch Manning stepped up, and he did what Mannings do.
Yeah, dude, he looked fantastic. And they just blasted. I know UTSA got spanked by a solid Texas State squad previously too. But UTSA is still a solid Group of 5 program with a really good coach, and I mean that was just ugly. And there was no drop off at all when Arch came in. And dude, with the hype of the Manning name and stuff, that's just good for him. Dude, think about him when he was when we saw him spring ball, that first spring he was there in that spring ball football game, and to now, and how much he has improved since he's been there. It just goes to show, again, the tutelage of Sark with his quarterbacks. And if you're a big-time quarterback, why you wouldn't want to play for that guy. It also shows why the Manning family decided to not just have Arch where he could go wherever and just start immediately, that the best thing for him in his future was to stay right there, develop, get bigger, get stronger, and, get the tutelage from Sark. And it showed. He looked incredible. And obviously, too, I know he's got dual threat ability. That dude can fly. He's an athlete, man.
He's not like Peyton or Eli with those legs.
No, he's Cooper. He's Cooper.
Yeah.
He's his dad with his legs. And yeah, I mean, some of those highlights of him just taking off and running and outrunning DBs to the end zone. Yeah, man, that white boy can move. But yeah, Texas, they've through 3 games. I know we're only 3 games in, but they've looked as impressive or more impressive than anybody in the country so far.
Yeah, I think them along with Texas or with Miami and Tennessee and Ole Miss just kind of doesn't matter who the competition has been so far. And obviously, Texas has one of the best wins in the country so far, going on the road to the Big House and winning. So, we felt confident in putting them at number 1 right now. They might not stay that way. I mean, 2 weeks from now, Georgia may go into Tuscaloosa and win that game, and they may hop back up to number 1. So these are fluid rankings, obviously. But Georgia, number 2, man. They have one of these games every year, it seems like. A couple years ago was Missouri. Last year was at Auburn. But, man, we spent – how much time did we spend and everybody else bashing Kentucky all week, which is how they looked against South Carolina at home. And Georgia's favored by 22 in this game coming in. You think they're not going to have any issue. They've got Carson Beck, but there's something looked off. And obviously, Tate Ratledge going down on their offensive line does not do them any favors. But Kirby, again, this is what coaches love. They get the win. And he is going to get after them these next 2 weeks. And they're going to look at film. He's going to point out everything they did wrong, what they need to work on. He's going to harp on the fact that 9 months ago they went to Atlanta and they lost their chance to play in the playoff and win a 3rd national championship in a row to Alabama. So they're going to come in, guns blazing in a couple weeks here.
Yeah, and good news for Alabama fans is that we get to sit around now for the next 2 weeks and people dissect what's wrong with Georgia. People just disrespecting Georgia for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's rough.
And probably I would be there's a good chance that the poll that people shouldn't look at, but everybody does look at, in the cute little AP poll, there's a good chance that Texas also jumps them in that poll. And if that's the case, if Georgia looks at the good old ATB poll or the AP poll and Texas jumps them, that's even more motivation. Kirby will have them thinking that people think you're just going to win 7 games this year. People think you're trash, and they're just number 2 in the country. But neither here nor there. What you saw last night is the definition of what we get with 18 to 24-year-old college football players. Kentucky looks like absolute booty last week against South Carolina on their home field, and everybody, including us, just trashed them. Like the exact words we use. Well, Kentucky sucks. At least we know that only 2 weeks into the season. Don't have to wait till week 7 or week 8. And that's the definition of a bunch of talented football players with solid coaches spent all week feeling disrespected. Odds makers made them 24, 25-point underdog on their home field. They get a shot at the best program in college football in Georgia on their home field at night. Kroger Field was rocking. Kentucky played their butt off. I know what we like to do the most of the time, podcasts and talk shows and everything is just bash when the better team, like Georgia, doesn't necessarily take care of business like you probably think they should in a game like that. But we need to first give hats off to Kentucky. They were playing with their hair on fire last night. That defense was getting after Georgia's ass all night long. And Kroger Field was rocking. A couple of those running backs for Kentucky were running about as hard as you could possibly run. I mean, they were basically run. I think I talked to my dad this morning, and he said, man, some of those Kentucky running backs were running with the mindset of, you better not bring that shit over here and try to tackle me. He said, you better come with everything you got if you're going to try to tackle me. That's what Kentucky looked like last night. And so on the flip side of that, Georgia, it's just amazing as good as they are with winning, 42 wins in a row, something like that?
Yep,
42 regular season wins in a row. Mm-hmm. It's amazing that they still find ways to win games like that. They had no business last night winning that game offensively. Defensively, obviously, Georgia kept them in it. Had some guys out on injuries. I'm definitely going to point that out as well. I know other teams have injuries too, but still, Georgia had some of their best players on defense out with injury, and they still found a way to win. And I just want to point this out. I know a lot of people are crushing. I saw a lot of people crushing, especially Kentucky fans. They were crushing Mike Stoops after the game for, I think there was 2 minutes and something, 3 minutes, whatever it was. It was like 4th and 8 in their own territory. And people are like, this is why, Mike Stoops, he coaches conservatively. He's a boomer. He coaches conservative, too conservative. Look, at some point, it's not just coaching conservative. You're coaching trying to win a football game. I'm with you on certain parts of times where coaches are too conservative. In that situation, what had Kentucky's offense done to make you think that if Kentucky gives the football there to Georgia in their own territory, and Georgia basically already in field goal range, kicks a field goal and goes up by 4, what has Kentucky's offense shown you in that game to make you think that they're going to drive the field with a minute to go, basically, if they would have gotten the ball back with a minute to go to be able to score a touchdown against that Georgia defense? The only chance they had was to punt, pin Georgia back, and let that defense, who had been eaten all night against that Georgia offense, put your best unit on the field in that defense and let your defense go try to get you the ball back in plus territory. And didn't do it. I know it's easy to say after the fact that, you should have gone for it on 4th and 8. But I hadn't seen anything from that Kentucky offense that could make me think that Brock Vandagriff in the passing game could get a first down on 4th and 8 and then allow Georgia to kick a field goal and score a touchdown with 1 minute to go in the game. I don't know how you felt about that, but I thought Kentucky and Mike Stoops did the right thing there in that spot.
Yeah, I know you keep saying Mike Stoops, but I'm pretty sure Mark Stoops is the head coach of Kentucky.
Hey, there's a lot of Stoops, bro. A lot of Stoops, but you're right.
So Mike Stoops is a linebackers coach of Kentucky. But
yeah, my bad. Mark Stoops,
I think if that was a one-off thing, then whatever. But that's how he coaches.
It is.
I mean, Kirk Ferentz was just smiling. Kirk Ferentz was just smiling when he was watching that game. He was watching him punt that ball away. When Kirk Ferentz retires, Mark Stoops will probably go up and coach Iowa. It'll be great. Kirby was coaching a really conservative game too. I mean, like Bobo was calling a really conservative. I mean, it was a very uncharacteristic game for both squads. For Kentucky to play like they did, and for Georgia to play like they did. But yeah, I just think when you punt with 3 minutes like that, I don't know. I feel like the chances of you getting the ball back are about equal as you getting 4th and 8. So again, they got the ball back with 9 seconds ago. So, it was a good game regardless.
Great game.
Yeah, props to Kentucky, but we'll see what they do. Usually after the Georgia game, they usually falter. So we'll see what they do. Number 3 team, we moved Alabama up to number 3. And don't be surprised too if another poll maybe has Alabama ahead of Georgia.
Ooh.
And because they beat, a Wisconsin team that even Luke Fickell will tell you probably not any good. And you mentioned the same thing. We talked about it all week last week.
Yep.
The difference in the athletes that we saw in the Texas-Michigan game was going to be evident in the Alabama-Wisconsin game, and it was. I mean, right from the get-go. And it obviously didn't help that Tyler Van Dyke went out with injury. I mean, that sucks for that guy, but he did lead them to, their 3 of their 10 points. But I just, you knew as soon as that backup came in, Wisconsin wasn't scoring much more. The defense wasn't going to be able to keep up. I mean, that touchdown from Ryan Williams, the first touchdown in the first half, I mean, he just blew right by the guy. Like, it wasn't going to be much Wisconsin could do to slow him down. And Alabama was going to key in on the run on offense, and they were going to make Braden Locke beat him, which he wasn't going to be able to do. So I wouldn't be surprised, too. I mean, we've been looking at that Georgia-Alabama line in a couple weeks, and it hasn't really released yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if Alabama might be favored at home now.
Oh, well, if that's the case, yeah, we'll get to that next week. But yeah, this was exactly what we had this one nailed as far as how this one would go. The difference in athlete was very evident. The difference in team speed was on full display. This was as in command as I've seen Milroe look at quarterback for Alabama in a while. The Kentucky game last year in Lexington against LSU last year, and probably this game. And why was that? Because the offensive line allowed him to be in command. And the offensive line was fully healthy. This was the starting offensive line that was supposed to be the starting offensive line going into the year for the first time this year, and they looked a lot better. The penalties were completely cut down in this game, which was huge for Bama because they've been just awful through the first 2 weeks, like ranked in the bottom 10 to 15 in the country going into this week, and that didn't happen. Didn't turn the football over. So again, they just looked to be in a lot more command overall. Milroe played a great game, and I'll say this on the flip side: when you thought when Luke Fickell took over the Wisconsin job, like I know a lot of people talked about, like, oh wow, they finally going to get a coach in there that's going to be able to get a different type of athlete at Camp Randall. They're going to bring in some dudes at Camp Randall. I didn't see a whole lot of dudes yesterday. That was pretty alarming if you're a Wisconsin fan, that there was that major of a mismatch in this NIL era with a solid coach in Luke Fickell and a coaching staff that, like, that defensive line, slow. Yeah, again, they still play hard, get after you up front and stuff, but it was wild seeing those two teams on the field at the same time and seeing just the major mismatch across the board. I mean, Will Pauling, the receiver for Whiskey, maybe a couple of those DBs, and that's it, that really belong on the same field as far as athlete is concerned. But Bama took care of business, went up to Camp Randall, put it on them. I thought it was interesting too in the fourth quarter, the difference in Alabama as far as like how they carry themselves under DeBoer as opposed to Saban. The whole team was doing the jump around on the field when they played at the beginning of the fourth quarter. I don't think you would have seen that in the Saban era. But Bama took care of business. Be interesting to see where they are, where they fall in the AP poll, if they do go to number 2, if they stay at 3, 4, whatever. But we've got them at 3.
Yeah. Not much else to say about that game. I mean, I texted you, and I know you hate it when I do this, but we had Bama minus 15.5, and they were up 28-3, and I said, it's over. And you were like, you were downvoting and everything. I was like, dude, it's just not a fair fight. It's pretty easy to tell. Like, This one's a winner, and you knew pretty early on that if you had Bama covering the spread, you were going to be having a happy day, or at least a happy noon slate there. But
real quick, we're not one that likes to report a lot of news here, but we'll say Malachi Moore, Kalen DeBoer has already said he's fine. He'll be ready to go. I think he went into concussion protocol. No word yet on the edge rusher Quay Rusal, who was a 5-star coming out of high school. This is his second year at Bama, and he's looked really, really good through the first 2 weeks. And part of that D line that they've got a lot of depth at right now. One of their better pass rushers. It didn't look good, did not look good, but there's no word yet on what that is and how long he'll be out, and if it's a season-ending type injury, not sure yet.
Yep. Number 14, we got Ohio State. They had a bye yesterday. They haven't played anyone. They played a couple MAC schools. They're going to be similar to Michigan last year, where I look back and we had Michigan number 6 in our poll as far as, week 7, because they just hadn't played anybody.
Right.
So at least until October 12th when they go to Eugene, we're going to just kind of tout they haven't played anybody. And Ohio State fans, and they would be they would be super happy if it turned out like Michigan 2023.
Yeah.
And everybody just, they didn't play anybody and coasted.
Right. They might be the best team in the country.
Yeah.
They're definitely one of the 2 most talented teams in the country. It's just a matter of when they play, like you said, when they play somebody, they'll shoot up our board if they play well and win.
Yeah. That's what we said about Michigan last year. They may be the best team in the country, but we have no idea. So number 5 has looked pretty dominant. Ole Miss, we kept them there. They went to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, won 40-6 as I think 21, 22-point favorites.
Key about that one?
Solid.
Yeah, key about that one. Wake Forest isn't very good, but they're still a solid offensive squad.
Yeah.
When have you seen Ole Miss in the Lane Kiffin era, especially, but like really in a while?
Yeah.
Go somewhere and look dominant defensively.
I think their defense is pretty solid.
Exactly. That's what we all knew that Dart and that offense was going to do their thing. And under Kiffin, Ole Miss offense has been great every year. But what was on full display, and I caught a good bit of that game because that's what I wanted to see, what they looked like defensively against that slow mesh, Dave Clawson slow mesh, because defensive lines, like, for example, Clemson, they've blown up that slow mesh for Wake Forest the majority of the time that Dave Clawson has been there. That's the Achilles heel to that slow mesh, is getting pressure. Ole Miss was getting plenty of pressure. And, yeah, they looked the part, man. I know that Wake Forest isn't very good, and they haven't really played anybody yet, but that was impressive, what they did defensively against Wake last night.
Yep. Number 6 and number 7, same as Ole Miss. I mean, just dominant regardless of the opponent. Miami and Tennessee.
Yep.
Miami beats up on Ball State. Tennessee beats up on Kent State. Tennessee just really does. They're out for blood this year, up 30-0 against Kent State, going for onside kicks, winning 71-0. Those teams look to be rolling. Tennessee's got a big test this week. College game day is in Norman for the Tennessee-Oklahoma game, which we'll get to later in the week here. But yeah, Cam Ward, Nico, they had easy days yesterday at the office.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, they're 2. I know there's some Heisman polls on 3 or whoever's been releasing Heisman polls. Except those 2 are definitely square, right there square in the race through 3 weeks of the season, as they should be. So, yeah, they just took care of business. They both look really good. And what I'll say more so about Miami, we've seen Miami look good against better opponents, but what's been impressive with them is against these terrible opponents. Normally, what we've seen from them for many years is they play down to the level of their competition. They're not doing that right now. They are blasting. They're doing exactly what you're supposed to do against these bad football teams.
Yep. Number 8 and number 9, both bye weeks. USC stays at number 8. Penn State stays at number 9. USC, big game against Michigan this week.
Yep.
3:30 on CBS on Saturday. We'll obviously talk about that one on our next episode. Penn State, out of bye week, they're not tested again really till that October 12th date when they play USC. They get to play Kent State this week, who Tennessee just beat by 70. So bye week and another bye week and maybe another bye week after that for Penn State. So Oregon, number 10, finally we get to see the Oregon
Welcome
offense.
To the party.
Yeah, Dylan Gabriel, highest QBR in the country yesterday. So he finally, knocked some rust off. They went into Corvallis against an underman Oregon State team. But again, it was a 17-point spread, and you win by 35. And that's always going to impress me. And you kind of said the same thing. Alabama-Wisconsin game. It's just athletes on the field versus lack of athletes.
It was. I caught a good bit of this one, and that was every bit of that. The speed differential between those two teams was unbelievable. And so
there was
Oregon,
one pass that screen pass they threw to Jaden Lamar, and he wasn't touched. Like
right.
absolutely not a single Beaver got his hands on him.
No, and you want to talk about as efficient and as good as you could possibly play on offense across the board. They were balanced. They were powerful on the offensive line. They ran the rock, threw the rock, deep balls, short passes, didn't matter. They were as efficient and as good as you could be on offense. They scored on every single possession except two. At the end of the first half, when they ran the clock out, they basically just ran up the middle 2 times to run the clock out, and at the end of the game when they took a knee.
Yep.
That's the only 2 possessions they didn't score on. So every single possession, like true offensive possession that Oregon had, they scored on at Reser Stadium against the Beavs.
They needed it too. I mean, their defense needed a good game like that. So
yeah, they definitely looked the part yesterday. So that also gets my attention on Boise.
Yeah,
going on the road to last week in Autzen Stadium and playing Oregon to the wire.
Yeah, maybe Oregon just struggles with the state of Idaho. We don't know. They got to play Idaho State for us to figure out, so we'll see.
Yep. And another team that was the only ranked versus ranked matchup yesterday was Mizzou Boston College. And Mizzou took care of business and won, but it was, a hard-fought game.
They struggled.
They did. They struggled a little bit. But I'll say this. The question marks that me and most people had about this Mizzou team was their defense. And they hadn't allowed a single point against 2 bad high school teams up until yesterday. And they looked solid against Boston College yesterday. That, again, I caught a good bit of this one. That defense looked really solid against Billy O'Brien and Castellanos' offense. They did. They looked really good. The only thing I'll say right now, Brady Cook seems to be struggling in the downfield passing game. With those receivers, as good as they are, with their ability to get open down the field, he's got to improve on that if they want to win bigger games that are going to come up down the stretch in College Station when they play in Tuscaloosa against Alabama. Cook has done a really good job running the ball. He's efficient in the short pass game. Those receivers are so explosive. I mean, he's hitting LB3 on a quick out, and then he's turning it into a 30-yard touchdown. I mean, that's what they're good at. But Cook has been a little rough in the downfield passing game so far. But good win for Mizzou at home yesterday.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add on Mizzou right now. I'm going to refrain from making some comments. It might kick me later on, but they've got Vandy. They got A&M in a couple weeks. 3 weeks here at A&M, so that should be their next test. But we'll see. We'll see then.
Yep.
I'll leave my comments on Mizzou until then. So number 12, new team in the ATB top 12 is Kansas State. Friday night in the Little Apple, taking care of business, dominant performance. One of my takeaways is Arizona may struggle this season a little more than we thought with the transition to Brent Brennan. And you said it, man. The line was 7.5. Vegas trying to tell you something. You're like, why is that? And I didn't listen. I should have been on your side, but Avery Johnson just looked like a gazelle out there, just toting the rock. They didn't have to throw much. DJ Giddens, Dylan Edwards, they both, we talked about them. Dylan Edwards with the punt return. Ted McMillan made some plays. Fafita threw it up to him, but they couldn't sustain many drives because that's their only option.
That's all they are. Yeah, that's all they are. And we actually did talk about that we thought Arizona would struggle a little bit this year. And so far they have. I mean, they struggled against New Mex on defense. Talked about how that their rush defense might suck. It does. And just on offense too, like the way they run the ball, like just a slow developing type, it's just strange. Like they allow so much penetration to occur when they're trying to run the ball. yeah, Fafita to McMillan is really all. I mean, that's a great combo, obviously, to have. But that's all they had. And that's all
Yeah.
they were trying to. That's all they could be successful on. They
Mm-hmm.
were hitting some crossing patterns because I think the speed of Lamonius Craig and
Yeah.
McMillan was tough to deal with for K State's pass defense. Like when they're running the crossers, using the whole width of the field, and just running basically just coming off the line of scrimmage and running full speed across the field. K State was having trouble keeping up with them, and I'm surprised they didn't. Like, that was there all night if
Yeah.
Arizona wanted to keep doing that, but they didn't. But Arizona, I mentioned this before the game that they were one of the worst penalized teams in the country, and they just kept shooting themselves in the foot the other
Yep.
night too. They've got problems there
Yeah.
on the penalty side. They were awful again with penalties. But yeah, K State was just a really good performance again at home under Chris Kleiman. And
Yep.
they deserve to be in this number 12 ranking. And for what Tulane ended up looking like against Oklahoma, we'll get to more of that in a minute. But that's still K-State going on. We're only 3 games in, so it's not like a bunch of teams have a ton of impressive wins right now. But beating the piss out of Arizona at home and going on the road to the Big Easy at Tulane and beating Tulane on the road, even though they struggled a little bit, that's 2 solid wins so
Yeah.
far for K-State.
Yep. Let's recap. Number 1, Texas. Number 2, Georgia. Number 3, Alabama. Number 4, Ohio State. 5, Ole Miss. 6, Miami. 7, Tennessee. 8, USC. 9, Penn State. 10, Oregon. 11, Missouri. 12, Kansas State. Utah falls out of the rankings. They got a win yesterday over Utah State, but didn't look impressive. I know they're missing our boy Cam Rising, but he will be back against their game in their game against Oklahoma State later on this week, which again, we'll talk about on our next episode that will come out on Thursday. So let's get to some quick hitters. Man, there are some tears in the northern part of the Sunshine State right now in Tallahassee and Gainesville. Memphis goes into Florida State and really comes out with a pretty easy 20-12 victory.
They were the better football team by far.
Yeah, and Florida, again, and we'll get to them here in a second, but they suffer at home to A&M 33-20 against A&M's backup quarterback who looked pretty freaking solid. But, gosh, Florida State, again, you're 0-3 now, and you got a home game coming up against Cal this week, who already went on the road to beat Auburn. So they're going to struggle, I think, to make a bowl game this year.
Yeah, they are. And first off, I want to say again, Memphis, big-time win for them. I know Florida State, they're down with it, but still, Florida State's got athletes on their team, and they were coming off a bye week, back against the wall, wounded animal mode. And Memphis
finally had a nice, easy victory in my Memphis plus 7.5.
Hey, you did. That was a nice call there. Yeah, that was a nice call there. But yeah, Memphis just took it to him, man. And it wasn't even like it wasn't like high flying. Like, no, it was, they lined up and out physicaled, and just beat Florida State, which is, if you're Florida State, that's what's most alarming. This wasn't like we're running fake punts, fake field goals, flea flicker stuff like the Statue of Liberty, old Boise State stuff, some of the stuff you see that big underdogs have to do to beat. No, they just lined up and whipped their ass in Tallahassee. And that's a problem. That's a problem. Not going to beat a dead horse. Florida State's just not good. That's just all there is to it. They've got talent. But we can continue to say the same stuff we say every week, that, they had guys that were absolute dudes on that team last year, and they replaced them with guys that aren't dudes. They're just solid little football players. They're not the same player. That's just not. And now you've got a bunch of transfers who aren't bought in that are now 0-3. So it could get much uglier for Florida State down the stretch. And
all it took is 3 games, and the fans are calling for Norvell's head, like just absolutely dismissing the fact that they went 13-0 last year, and he got a really hefty $87 million extension.
Yeah, he's not going anywhere.
In January. Yeah, he's not going anywhere at all. So you guys can.
They could lose every single game. They could literally go over, and he's not getting fired this year. But one thing I will, because you mentioned Cal coming here. Dude, that Cal bunch is a physical, play really hard football team. So, again, we're going to find out how much Florida State really likes football right now. Like, they're just 0-3. If they're not bought in, that's another one that can get ugly in a hurry because Cal is coming for blood this week. But on the flip side of it, dude, us and honestly everybody spent the summer convincing ourselves and trying to convince the rest of the world like that Florida was going to be better than what people thought because of the talent on their roster. And, we all knew that how obviously brutal the schedule was. But, dude, that is like I texted you yesterday and I said, there isn't a single thing that Florida is even above average at. They can't throw. They can't run. They can't block. They can't tackle. They can't rush the passer. They can't stop the run. They're terribly coached. They're undisciplined.
Yeah, that all points to you're just a not well-coached team. And as of 12:18 p.m. Eastern time on Sunday, September 15th, Billy Napier has not been fired. This news could have broken as we're recording this. We have no idea.
Yeah.
But it's coming.
They got that board of trustees meeting today.
Yeah.
Like normally when that happens, handwriting's on the wall that they're getting together trying to figure out how they're going to come up with the money to do the buyout. We have no idea. But I have it's a podcast. Of course, we're going to throw out a wild accusation or something every now and then or a little hot take. So again, I'm just asking you this question. How wild would it be? So we've seen like Bob Stoops step in for Oklahoma to coach the bowl game when they were going through that Lincoln Riley stuff, trying to figure out who their next coach was going to be for Brent Venables. We've seen Barry Alvarez step in at Wisconsin before, I think a couple of times, when they were changing coaches, like just legendary former coaches that are close with the program, that want to see the program do well. We've seen that happen at other programs. Do you think that the old ball coach would step off the golf course and put the visor back on in the interim role? If they fired Billy Napier today, do you think Steve Spurrier, do you think Florida would offer him the interim gig? Florida should. They should do that. That would make the fans just so happy and would create interest again and would bring everybody back to the swamp. If they did that? But would Steve Spurrier want to take that on this year in the interim role? He might for the right price. He seems like a guy that would go, sure, if you want to pay me that, might as well. Why not?
Or would Urban Meyer leave his position at Fox?
Dude, they'll never hire that man again for all the issues that they had down there. I know he won, but still. But no, in all seriousness, I think it's on the table. I think that would be on the table.
Could be.
Yeah, but that's, dude, again, that was unbelievable yesterday. But here we are talking the talk. I saw somebody say this on Twitter, and I couldn't agree more. All of the talk after that game is going to be about Billy Napier and him being fired or not fired and everything about Florida. There was nothing being talked about the flip side of how well coached and disciplined and everything that Texas A&M looked. I know that Florida's not very good, but A&M hasn't won a freaking road game since mid-October in 2021. 10 straight road losses. And they go on the road at Florida and look like a well-oiled machine with a backup quarterback. And that was a good-looking A&M team yesterday. Ran the ball well. That freshman quarterback played really well. Defensively, we're getting after Florida. So, again, I know we always like to focus on the other stuff, but like A&M and Mike Elko, that was a good-looking bunch yesterday in the swamp.
Yeah. Yep. You got to explain to me what happened in the LSU game. I left.
That game was drunk.
I watched about the first quarter and a half or so, and then I left, and, it could have been South Carolina fans, whatnot, I don't know, but it seemed like maybe the officiating was a little suspect in the fourth quarter. And again, this is college football. The officiating is always going to be suspect. Like the targeting rule in college, I mean, it may be the worst rule in sports.
Awful.
just again in the Florida A&M game, the guy tackles a guy, like hits his butt with his helmet.
Not even the crown. Like, this is face mask. Just went
Yeah,
straight
and
into
it gets called a targeting. He gets kicked
Yeah.
out of the game and is out of the next game for the first half, which, again, like, they've got to do something about this rule. It happens every year. We talk about it. I know it's not going to change. They're not going to take away targeting, but, like, kicking a guy out of the game, okay, sure. But then don't make him sit the next game. Like, that's ridiculous. That has nothing to do.
Dude, this isn't that hard. I don't mean to cut you off, but this isn't that hard. We can watch a game. Everybody has eyeballs. We know when it's a vicious, like a type play, when it's a vicious type targeting play, like that needs to be outlawed in the game. That it's easy to take. Yeah, you're gone. Like the Sean Murphy linebacker for Alabama in the second half against South Florida makes exactly a beautiful football play. Gets tossed for targeting, missed the first half of the Wisconsin game. We see it every year. That Florida one was one of the worst I've seen. That was awful. But it's so egregious now. It's gotten out of control, out of hand. It's been that way, but it's worse than it's been. But as far as the South Carolina LSU game, I think Herbie said it best there at the end. Like, whoever ends up losing this game, you're going to go back and say, like, man, what could have been? And that's exactly what I'm saying for South Carolina. Lenore Sellers going down. If he I think if you could say that if he plays that whole game, they win that game. But what you can also say is whatever you want to say about the officials, there still was some significant, just terrible, undisciplined stuff that South Carolina was doing. And 13 penalties for 123 yards and 3 turnovers. Blame the officials all you want. You can't do that and beat good football teams in a big game. You can't. And they still almost won the game. But they could have still had 13 penalties for 123 yards and 3 turnovers. And if Lenore Sellers plays the rest of that game, they probably win that game still. Again, that was as hostile. That Williams-Brice was on full display, man. That place was everything we thought it was going to be and more.
LSU defense was everything we thought it was going to be and more.
LSU defense still sucks. They're awful. I don't know. Again, they just don't have. I don't know. The personnel obviously isn't good. What's wild is they're still a little bit better than what they were last year because they were so bad last year, but they're still not good. And dude, hats off to that South Carolina D front. We thought that the leg up was going to be the LSU offensive line. No, it wasn't. That South Carolina D, that was a great matchup overall. I mean, LSU still did really good holding up against that really good. I can say holding up. They did enough. The LSU offensive line did enough. Nussmeier made some big time throws. Was able to get the ball off more in that second half. I definitely think LSU found a little bit in the running game. Being a box score berry here, Caden Durham was a freshman running back for LSU at 11 carries for 98 yards, almost 9 yards a carry and 2 touchdowns. Herbie, again, was talking about it during the broadcast. Same thing that we've talked about. I mean, they haven't had a really good tailback since, Fournette and Darius Geis. You always saw LSU having big-time tailbacks, and they just don't. And yesterday, again, they're sitting there at the goal line in like a goal line situation, and they don't feel from the 1-yard line that they can run the ball in. And they're throwing the ball at the 1-yard line. And at the end of the game, they finally ran one in there from the 1. But this was, in my opinion, a very big-time missed opportunity for South Carolina. And it reminded me of like Mizzou last year when they got LSU at home, and Mizzou had LSU on the ropes the whole game. They had a late turnover, and LSU ended up taking it from them late. That was a situation here. That penalty that they had on the pick six, where they took a shot at Nussmeier on the blind side. I know some people are like, that shouldn't be a penalty. I mean, the play was 20 yards the other way. Nussmeier's not looking, and you take a shot at him. Some people say that's a football play, but that's a rule that they put into place, the illegal blindside type stuff, and that was the epitome of that. So it's hey, I think you said it though. Big win for Brian Kelly as far as taking the pressure off him. If they lose that game to South Carolina, with Robbie Ashford basically playing quarterback the whole second half, could you imagine the LSU fan base and that crew today? That'd have been wild. But it was a very entertaining, great football game though. And as far as South Carolina is concerned, if Sellers can continue to get better, that's a bunch that can win some games this year with how good that defensive line is.
Yep, LSU's got UCLA and South Alabama, then a bye week, and then they get Ole Miss down in Baton Rouge. So that'll be the next tough test for the Tigers. Yep. Backyard brawl, man. Pittsburgh Panthers, the Cardiac Cats do it again.
Yeah.
Last week it was Cincinnati. This week it's at home against Neil Brown in West Virginia. Gosh, that's a crusher for West Virginia. After all the hype they had coming into the season and hosting Penn State and just getting blasted, to come in here and be leading by 10 with, 8 minutes to go, 7 minutes to go. And your boy, Eli Holstein, he's working his fourth quarter magic again.
He's just he's a gamer, man. Like watching him too, he's just a competitor. And when Bama got him out of the state of Louisiana, that was some of the things that were talked about with him. He's just a hard-nosed, competes his butt off. And you saw that on full display. Look, everything that people love about college football was on full display in that game. Those are two teams, the Backyard Brawl, those are two teams, two fan bases that have a total, just absolute disdain for one another. Just pure hatred on display between those. That's what makes rivalries fantastic. What also makes it fantastic is you have guys in the big games like that, in big rivalry games, teams, players, play above their heads, make plays that they normally don't make in other games. And that was being the whole game, man. There were just big plays being made. The one-handed grab that the West Virginia receiver had in the front corner of the end zone there. Holstein, like you said, playing like he did there in the second half. And I'll just say this, once again, I talk about it till I'm blue in the face every year. When you get a legit play caller on offense, or if you get a legit coordinator on defense, how much it truly does help you. Pitt looked like they could not they were having trouble getting first downs last year on offense. And they bring in Cade Bell from Western Carolina, who had one of the best offenses in all of Division I football for the last couple of years. He's now the OC. They bring in Holstein, who, again, hadn't played a lick of college football yet. They got a decently talented QB who's a good competitor with a really good play caller. And here's Pitt dropping 38 in the Backyard Brawl against West Virginia. But the difference in this game, that was one of those games again where who has the ball last, who's going to have whatever. To me, the difference in the game was Pitt had 0 turnovers, West Virginia had 2. Penalty-wise, overall stat-wise, it was pretty equal across the board. It was just a very well-played, great football game that Pitt ends up winning at the very end. And, West Virginia, 1-2 to start the year. But good news for them, they haven't had a single game yet in conference play, so everything's still in front of them with this new 12-team playoff. With the part of if they can win the Big 12, they're going.
Yeah. How about another comeback? Last night, UCF, KJ Jefferson going on the road and coming back on TCU. I think they were down by 17 or 18 at one point.
31-13.
Yeah, and they go on the road. Yeah, getting a win on the road away from the bounce house is always solid for them, and that sets them up really nicely. I know they got Florida in a couple of weeks or a week or two, whatever. Yeah. They shouldn't be too worried about that, hopefully. But it's that was a big win for UCF.
It was. They got things rolling there in the second half. KJ Jefferson looked awful through about 3 quarters, and then out of nowhere, he gets things rolling.
That's the KJ experience.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Like, he looked so terrible during the first half. And they weren't really trying to turn him loose, but then when they started trying to turn him loose, he still wasn't very good. And then out of nowhere, he just gets things rolling, man. Hits Kobe Hudson on a few, big ball. Kobe Hudson had 24 yards per catch and 2 touchdowns against TCU yesterday. And that was UCF took the game at the end, but that again, man, when you're up 31-13 on your home field, you've got to be able to seal the deal. You've got to be able to win that football game. And that was just as much of an indictment on TCU as it was UCF going and winning that game. I just don't understand. Like TCU can't run the football. That was also evident. Had 17 carries for 58 yards rushing. So when you can't run the football and you got a big lead like that, you can't put the game away. And they couldn't. And R.J. Harvey, again, had over 100 yards rushing, looked really good, tailback. He got the bulk of the carries. He definitely is their top back. I know they've got other solid backs there. He's easily the top back for them. But that was a big win. That was one of the better games overall of the day. Lived up to it. But it was a beatdown until about midway through the third quarter, and then it got entertaining real quick.
Yep. Oklahoma welcomed in Tulane yesterday. Again, Oklahoma defense looks really solid. Yep. Held Tulane to 13 points on offense. They had a pick six, but that Oklahoma offense still obviously some question marks. But I mean, the defense looks solid. Only the big question is are they going to be able to slow down Tennessee next week?
That's going to be the matchup, man. That's the matchup because Oklahoma's offensive line, we knew that was the big question mark that everybody had about this team going into the season. That's not breaking news, but yeah, they've got problems, man. And I'm not sure they've got one of the best O-line coaches in the country, but to be so handicapped with their offensive line, I mean Jackson Arnold still finds ways to make plays. He hasn't been as good as what I think people thought he was going to be going into the year, but it's kind of hard for me to really, really grade him. I feel like, really evaluate him with how bad that offensive line is. But I mean, Arnold had 97 yards rushing himself and 2 touchdowns. He basically did it all yesterday for that offense. He was their offense yesterday. And for everything, though, that everybody talked about this Oklahoma defense going into the year, they're legit. They are. They look the part. And it's just amazing seeing how good Brent Venables really is, man, as a defensive coach. I mean, you think about where they were under Lincoln Riley as a defense and everything he had to overturn there, and he's doing it again the right way. They don't have a bunch of transfers on that defense. They've got guys that are in their third year in that Venables system. And they look like it. They're well coached. They tackle well. They're ball hawks. And so they're going to have their work cut out for them this coming week with Tennessee. But real quick on Tulane. That's back-to-back weeks. They've played 2 really good football teams, and they're sitting there in the fourth quarter. And there's old John Summerall's Tulane squad just fighting their butts off in the fourth quarter against 2 really good football teams. We're going to give the G5 a little more love here in a minute, but if they're to run the table the rest of the year, that game, last regular season game of the year when they host Memphis in Tulane, could be something to keep an eye on as far as that G5 team.
Yeah.
That gets in the playoff.
Yep. On Saturday, about 11:30 a.m. Eastern, my brother-in-law, Nick, shout out to Nick, loyal listener of the show. He calls me and he's a Purdue grad, and he's got a couple tickets to the Notre Dame Purdue game. Asked me if I want to go. I said, yeah, sure, we'll go. It's about an hour from my house where I live. So we jetted up 65 North and hit up West Lafayette, and we spent roughly the same amount of time in the car driving up there as we did in the stadium. We left about halftime, and it was pretty evident from the get-go on that first drive with Notre Dame that it was going to be a mismatch, and I tweeted out right after that, the first observation, Purdue looks really slow. I mean, Jeremiah Love just went right around. Again, Jeremiah Love, if you saw the Northern Illinois game, hurdles a guy in the third quarter on the way to like a 34-yard touchdown run. Great highlight-making play. After that, he gets 1 carry for 3 yards. He's easily the best player on Notre Dame's offense by far. He still only had 10 carries yesterday. He had a couple catches, but it's still not enough touches for him. I know they like to spread the wealth. They got Jadarian Price back there, but they also this game's going to trick a lot of people into thinking that Notre Dame's offense is fixed. It is not. Purdue's just a really, really bad football team.
Yep.
I told my brother-in-law, I got nothing bad to say about Purdue University, okay, as a whole. And Ross 8 Stadium, even though it's smaller than you would like it to be, great venue. Purdue's football team is bad. And if you listen back to our best and worst case scenarios episode from the Big Ten, I said this was a worst case scenario for them. They could beat Indiana State first week of the season, and then they're going to lose every game after that. And they go to Oregon State this next week, and that might be the best chance for them to get another W, because after that, they've got one of the toughest schedules in the country. And this was just a mismatch, though. I mean, and it looked like towards the end of the first half, Purdue didn't even want to play anymore. They weren't even trying. Hudson Card threw a terrible pick six. Again, Notre Dame's just trying to run out the clock at the end of the first half with 20 seconds left, and they just let Jadarian Price untouched 70 yards to take a 42-0 lead. But again, Notre Dame's offense is not fixed. Riley Leonard still refuses to throw the ball deep. Multiple times in my end zone that I was sitting in, guys just wide open down the field, and Riley Leonard decides to tuck it and run the ball. He's got it. He's got to chuck it. I mean, he's just got to chuck it. And yesterday would have been a perfect time to. You obviously have a 3, 4, 5 touchdown lead. Try some deep shots. No one's going to get on you for run it up the score against Purdue. So I wouldn't read too much into it if I'm a Notre Dame fan. Obviously, you're going to be pissed because you're going to be like, where the heck was that last week against Northern Illinois, and what the heck happened? But, they still have a chance to right the ship. They've only got one more true road game, and that's the last week against USC. They've still got Louisville. They've still got Georgia Tech on the schedule, but it's that was about as early as I've ever left a big-time football game.
Yeah, that was nasty from the beginning. That was, again, one of those, what I like to say, I did it again. Early in that game, I just said, we need to change the channel because this is, I said, and somebody needs to say over the loudspeakers right now in that stadium, get the women and the children out of here.
Yeah,
that's
one too. It's like against like that Georgia TCU national championship game. You should have just been betting live lines Notre Dame as long as you could. I mean, they had more touchdowns than Purdue had first downs. It was just a total mismatch. So
yep. And if you want to talk about overreactions, going into last weekend, Notre Dame was like a 16.5 point favorite over Purdue after they lost to Northern Illinois. The line ended up on Saturday going down to Notre Dame -7, and hats off to you that you jumped in there and just said, this has just gotten too disrespectful. I'm going to take Notre Dame -7, take my chances. And you quickly knew you were on the winning side on that one. Let's stay in the same state, man. Let's stay in the same state. And one of the best hashtags you can use on social media during basketball season to get interaction is hashtag IUBB for hashtag IU basketball. One of the best hashtags you might be able to use right now is hashtag IUFB for the Indiana Hoosier football squad. And old Siggs and Kirk Signetti went to the parking lot, the Rose Bowl, and just
the packed Rose Bowl.
A lot of red in that stadium.
47,000 strong.
Yeah. Hey, a lot of red was in that stadium like you predicted.
Yeah, half of that was red.
Yeah. But, dude, I know UCLA's booty.
For reference, Rose Bowl seats like 90,000, right? So 47,000 is not a lot.
Right. But, hey, I know UCLA sucks. They do. But I don't care. This is Indiana we're talking about. And they go on the road favored and just wax UCLA on the road. They waxed a Power 4 program on the road. And Curtis Rourke, very efficient again on offense. Oh, yeah. They've got a couple of good-looking receivers on offense. It's obvious, too, that this team's already taken on the personality of Signetti and how physical that they look like they're playing. And, dude, you said it last night. You start looking at this schedule. Don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but there is, it's more likely to happen than not happen. Because, if you look at headlines and stuff like that, Nebraska and Indiana are both going to be favored, right? And all of their games until they play each other. And so you're looking at a matchup here soon where you might have a 6-0 Nebraska and a 6-0 Indiana in Bloomington, right? That game's in Bloomington?
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, Indiana looks good, man. And you were putting on X yesterday and last night. Rank the Hoosiers, you cowards. Rank these boys.
The offense, the passing game, Curtis Rourke looks very good. They've got 3 and maybe 4, but 3 really good wide receivers. They've got a really good tight end. The running game could still use a little work, but when you're slinging the rock like that and then playing defense like they were, they've got a good chance to be one of IU's best teams in a long time. And I will say that IU Nebraska game on October 19th, you're not going to like this, being a fan of the conference you're in, but Georgia Texas is that day, Alabama Tennessee is that day. College Game Day needs to step up their stuff and go to Bloomington. If both those teams are 6-0, I mean, sure, they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. They're going to go to Texas again. Correct. They're going to go to SEC. I mean, that's just what they're going to do. Yep. But if they really wanted to get, let's go back to the 90s when Game Day, it really was invented, right? Mm-hmm. And that was what it became, a traveling show, hitting up as many places as they could. And they've been to every place except for like 6 or 7. They went to IU one time, and it was a Thursday night opener game. It doesn't really count. But 6-0 Bloomington would be rocking. And they haven't seen, a football team like that in a really long time. So, but I got my notes here, man. You want to throw some G5 love. This probably couldn't have anything to do with the fact that you spent your, hard-earned money on Mississippi State against Toledo, right?
Whoo! Texted old Cole Frederick, our buddy, and we're like, I can't believe we've got actual money on this Mississippi State team. Toledo quarterback was 8 for 23 against UMass the previous week. UMass went up and down the field, outgained them by a ton. Toledo's, there's one of those deals where the score didn't tell you what the box score was going to do. So, Mississippi State with Jeff Lebby and that offense, you thought would come back off a loss, home to Mississippi. I saw some other so-called sharps that were lining up on Mississippi State as well after I'd already put a little coin on it. Dude, what an embarrassing performance by Mississippi State. But again, the MAC attack right now, dude, with Northern Illinois putting it on Notre Dame last week. Now Toledo goes on the road to Stark Vegas and just blisters Mississippi State and Stark Vegas.
Dude, it's so bad for the Cowbells that Ole Miss fans aren't even talking trash to them.
Right. It's kind of like we've seen some of these Florida State people on X that are defending Miami, saying Miami should be ranked higher than what people are ranking them. I'm like, man, you're down bad, bro. If you're sitting there lobbying for the Canes right now, you know who I'm talking about too. I'm not even going to mention his name, but I've seen others doing the same thing. There's also, like you said, Ole Miss ain't even talking trash right now to Mississippi State because it's so bad. But the Toledo with a big win. You have Northern Illinois getting a win at Notre Dame. I think was it Friday night or Thursday night? UNLV, Kansas. Whatever night, doesn't matter.
That was a big win.
Yeah, UNLV getting a win against Kansas. The only thing I'll say about Kansas is we all talked about how big of a hire it was for Andy Kotelnicki at Penn State and how good that was going to be for Penn State. What people didn't talk about enough is how bad that was possibly going to be for Kansas, and that looks every bit of that right now. They look like a completely different offense right now, Kansas does. Also, Tulane, back-to-back weeks, plays 2 really good ranked football teams in the Power 4 and gives them all they want. Memphis goes on the road and just is the better football team and handles Florida State. We saw Texas State. I know they lost that. That sucks, man, that they lost that game as far as if you're a Texas State backer and G.J. Kinney, it'd be tough for them depending on what goes on around them. But then in Boise, we saw how good Oregon looked yesterday. And Boise goes on the road to Watson and gives Oregon all they can handle. Man, there's some really good football being played by some of the better teams at the G5 level. That's going to be interesting going forward to see who gets that spot.
Yeah, you left one out too. We heard someone last week say that Vanderbilt coach Clark Leal was going to be the next Notre Dame coach, and then he goes out and he loses to Georgia State.
Touché.
I don't think anybody's saying that.
That's
now,
right.
Are they?
No, they're not.
So
they're not. The hot takes fly, man. From week to week, from week to week.
That's what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, it is. But that's all I've got on the G5. Right now, I'll say UNLV, Northern Illinois. I know Tulane lost 2 games, but still, if Tulane wins out and they face an undefeated Memphis team or a one-loss Memphis team at the end of the year, end up winning the American Conference, depending on obviously what goes on around them. Like if Boise were to win out, maybe Boise gets that spot. But Tulane, UNLV, Memphis, Northern Illinois, Boise, those teams are in the driver's seat right now as far as getting the leg up to try to get that G5 spot for the playoff.
Yep. All right, let's finish off this episode with a little Guess the Spread brought to you by SeatGeek. If you need tickets, SeatGeek has the best deals. For our first-time users, use promo code AlwaysTalkinBall and get $20 off of your first purchase. Download the SeatGeek app and use AlwaysTalkinBall to save on your next event or game. Let's start off with Friday night in Lincoln, Illinois at Nebraska. What do you think?
In Lincoln, right? Is that what you said?
In Lincoln. This is as of midday, noon, 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon.
Nebraska 7.5.
Nebraska minus 8.5.
Okay.
Big matchup. Arkansas at Auburn.
Ooh. Auburn 4.5.
Exactly. Auburn 4.5.
Okay.
He's dialed in today, folks.
That was the definition of throwing something up against the wall, hoping it sticks.
He is dialed in. All right, let's see how well he's dialed in for this one. 3:30 on CBS. We'll get to this game on Wednesday on our preview show. USC at Michigan.
Trojans 4.5.
Trojans 6.5.
So they're the same as what Texas was.
Yeah.
When that game kicked off, Texas was 6.5.
That line's probably flipped, a good 2 touchdowns at least since preseason.
Yeah, that's going to be very intriguing. I we'll get to it more. That's going to be very intriguing with line of scrimmage play and this. We'll see if USC really has bulk. I know they bulked up. Yeah, we'll get to that one Wednesday.
It's not necessarily USC's on the same level of Texas, but Michigan has really dropped in the eyes of power ratings.
Right.
So,
yep.
Next game, we talked about it earlier. Cal at Florida State.
Oh, is Cal favored on the road in Tallahassee? Cal 3.5.
Right now, it is still Florida State minus 3.5.
God, that just shows
this
you.
Might be the last chance that you have to bet an underdog against Florida State and take the money line outright.
Well, I know this will probably come up on our betting segment coming up here soon. But Justin Wilcox as an underdog is incredible, outright and against the spread.
Yeah,
Florida State better hope that there are a lot of people pound that Cal a little bit, and it goes to the Cal being favored. But wow, that just shows you though the difference in power rating models and rankings and stuff like that.
Yep. All right, a couple more games. This one's a good one. Kansas State at BYU in Provo. It's a night kickoff. We've talked to you about the BYU Vampires. Again, they did it again in Laramie this past Saturday. But they're playing at 10:15, I think.
10:30 Eastern kick. A little Provo, little Provo after dark.
Exactly. So Kansas State at BYU. What do you think? Kansas State coming off a big win.
Kansas State 7.
7.5.
Okay, dude.
So are you brave enough? Are you brave enough to take the Vampires plus 7.5?
That Kansas State coming off that big win on the road in Provo at night. Things get weird there.
Yeah, sure do.
That's going to be interesting. That one may come up this week too.
Yeah. All right, 2 marquee games coming up. Utah at Oklahoma State.
I've been waiting for this one. Got another health of Cam Rising, but I'm assuming he's going to play. Oklahoma State 1.
Last I saw, Oklahoma State was minus 2.5.
Okay. Man, I don't have the gut. I ain't doing it right now. I got to hear some. I was about to do it for the first time in ATB history right here and guess the spread. Give out a bet. If Cam Rising's healthy, I really like Utah.
Okay. It's still September in Stillwater, so something goes on in September down there. So
it's strange, man. Ollie Gordon is not. He's really struggled at running the football.
Defenses are keying on him.
Yeah, he's really struggled in
shutting him down.
Yeah. All right, go ahead.
Which is crazy with that offensive line too. So
it is.
All right, last game here. College game day is in Norman. Josh Heupel making his return to Norman. Tennessee taking on Oklahoma.
Tennessee is 6.
Right now, Tennessee is -7.
Okay. Touchdown. Full touchdown
in Norman. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's all I got for you, man.
Hey, real quick, before the year started, all people were talking about just the freaking shootout we were going to have with Jackson Arnold versus Nico, and this may turn into a defensive slugfest between.
It might until Nico takes over and starts running them out of the building.
That's true.
It'll be a fun one to talk about on our Wednesday or Thursday episode of Always Talking Ball, where we do some previews of Week 4 action, which is the next time we will be on here. So again, thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for following, subscribing, following on social media, all that stuff. Share it with your friends, and we will see you all next time.